your pollinator habitat is working, it's really helpful to have a baseline knowledge and then being able to have a way to measure that success. And you don't have to be a scientist to do this. This is not actually that difficult. You just have to be consistent. And so the easiest way we implemented that was using the Pollard-Yates method, which is a transect method. And you do it the same way every week. And we worked with the Ohio Lepidopterist Society, which I hope is still going, but they've been collecting data for, I mean, decades and decades. And so we would submit our data every year. I went to the meetings every year, and we did see an increase in butterfly populations. And one of the things that we think is the reason we saw an increase was because we use such a diverse palette of species going in. And we call this, now in scientific terms, and we study this here at the Arboretum too, phylogenetic diversity is what we call it. And basically what we mean by that is just, you're considering biodiversity and the evolution of, and you're counting for evolutionary history in that diversity. So you're looking at your tree of life, and you're going through the phylogenetic categories of all of these species, and you're actually accounting for diversity across the tree of life, so different parts of the phylogenetic tree. And we're testing that question right now with a National Science Foundation project here at the Arboretum, and I called the PI who is in charge of this the other day and just made sure I knew what the latest data was. But we were looking, does phylogenetic diversity affect the success of restoration, which I think is very relevant to your question here. And basically, I think we can conclude so far that diversity does beget diversity. It's not as clean as you'd like it. It's difficult because you do have to manage and monitor along the way, and there's a lot of weeding involved. In other words, that means a lot of weeding involved. And the niche spaces are going to be different depending on the site, and you're going to see shifts in those populations over time. But the more you put ahead of time, it's like you give it a better chance to work itself out, find those niches, and you generally tend to get greater diversity in the end. So if you introduce more at the beginning and you consider that diversity across phylogenetic history, you do tend to get more diversity in your successionary years. So that's something to take home with you. And I think having woody species, which you're an arboretum, so there are woody species around, so that's great, but thinking about that too. And I also noticed that, more natives than weeds. Weeds it's always been a tricky one for me, what a weed is. I have a love relationship with plants, and even weeds I love. And so some of the bad ones, we have problems, and I do have anger around them sometimes, but mostly weeds, you have to be really careful about what that is, because think of it from a pollinator point of view, not a human aesthetic point of view. If you really want to, if it's really about the pollinators, then you got to get into the spirit of the pollinators and what they need. And they need nettles, and they need really weedy things. And after doing much exploration of following Jim Davidson around Ohio, I realized that some of these butterflies and pollinators hang out in the strangest places that you would just consider a weed patch. And there they are. And why is that? And it's usually because of host plants. When it comes to butterflies, it's all about the host plants. Bees are different. Bees are a little different than butterflies, as you probably know. But anyways, host plants are huge. So you want to go through the whole list of Ohio butterfly species and make sure you know every host plant. And you'll be surprised at the kind of species you need to grow. So I'm going to pause and then answer questions. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't consent yet. I just saw the pop-up. Sorry. So now it's recording.
Well, sorry we didn't start that beforehand.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I completely forgot, and I had given myself several notes to do that. But
So what would you like me to talk more about? Did any of those things I brought up kind of spark any discussion there?
Yeah, hi, this is Petra. We had looked at what the Arboretum looks like now, and I had put together a PowerPoint presentation. So my main question is how to go about restoring this.
Petra, I even included some of your, Petra is a wonderful volunteer for Arboretum North, and she's already gone around. Why can't I move forward? Huh. I can't get it. Oh, there it goes. She's gone around and has looked at Arboretum North's Pollinator Hillside to see what the diversity is out there, Nicole.
Okay.
And let's see here. So it's 1/3 of an acre. And I found this list, and I'm not sure if this is from you.
Yeah.
This might be what you planted initially.
Yeah.
Does that look about right?
That looks
so there's
about right.
a lot. You did so much. You know, I just started putting them in tiny down there. We've been doing a bio inventory.
Good.
It's a little bit willy-nilly. It's not going to be the transect idea that you brought up, which I really want to learn more about doing. But in our bio inventory on iNaturalist, we've seen that we do have tons of diversity out there at Arboretum North.
Okay.
But our hillside is almost completely goldenrod, which is a great pollinator plant, but the diversity over time has really gone down.
Yes.
And that's what, this is Petra here in that photo, and she took this. So she's been sort of spearheading our talks about, you know, how do we start to manage these areas better? And that's, yeah, so that's sort of a short
Okay.
look
Yeah,
at that.
so you're dealing with, you know, you're dealing with, okay, you've got to start to a system. It's kind of working, but you'd like to enhance it. So you're really doing an enhancement. And those are really tricky because, you know, you don't want to get rid of everything. So you don't want to start from scratch, but you want to enhance the diversity. And that is very hard, difficult. There's really no way around it other than a lot of dedicated work, a dedication to continuing to replace and monitor and do a lot of weeding. A good potential, and something I did with my dad, who also has a site at Ohio University. He had a site where he was restoring, and he didn't use any he didn't use any equipment, no herbicide. And so he was trying to find like really basic methods of how to enhance a prairie site, like and it was by a river. It was very similar to this in terms of like the site conditions. And what he used, which seemed to work, and I also utilized this at the Wilds, is he used these large sheets. Like if you get like sheets of like roof, like metal sheets, like off of old roofs, or square planks, you know, boards that you could just lay down and suffocate the plants that you want to kill. So like if you have a large area of, say, goldenrod or something, you can, you know, you can suffocate it and let it sit for a couple of seasons. Great for snakes, by the way, which is, I consider good, but you know, you do have to be careful because people are afraid of snakes, but you know, generally snakes love under boards. So also great snake habitat. And then you basically kill an area of grass, of whatever, grass, goldenrod, whatever you don't want. And you're not like hurting the whole site, and you're just having these pockets. And then you go in and you could do, I don't know if you have access to the greenhouse, which I would recommend, you know, start those plants inside. And I would do what we did with Michael, because I was reading the paper, it worked better. You basically make sure when you're propagating those plants, you have a really compact soil that you're propagating it in. You don't want to just propagate it in like really nice fluffy media. You know, get that compacted. You may even want to take some of this soil so that you introduce some of the mycorrhizae in it, and you compact it in, and you can't have 100% field soil in those propagation units because it doesn't quite work in the greenhouse. But if you mix it with medium and you introduce field soil, you will get a better plant, because that plant will just, the root system will just kind of lock in better. And then you take those, you know, you take a soil core and then you plant them very heavily. And I would do monocultures in those areas. Like you do you place those boards around, maybe try 5 or 10 at first. And then you decide, okay, I want to enhance it with these 10 types of species. And you propagate them in the greenhouse, and then you plug them in pretty early spring, but not too early, because most of these plants are warm season. Although if you're trying to enhance early season species, maybe that is something you can think about, like beard's tongue, or there's some zizia. There's a few species that are more early, and then you could plant them earlier. But if they're warm season and you plant them too early, they tend to be really yellow and they don't get going until the sun comes out and warms up. So you just want to get your timing right. But you plug those in, and I would put them in monocultures, like small monocultures, patchy monocultures in those sites. And I think you could enhance and enrich your species that way. I've done it. It does work. You'd still need to go back and weed them, but it's a way, and it's aesthetically more pleasing to the public, because they see patches of flowering species together, and you get more of a you know, a coloring. So that is a way to do it. Watering though is really key, and you know, some years are just really rough. Early this year was great for transplanting. I mean, really good for transplanting this year, but then we got a drought later, like now we're in a drought. So, but earlier this year, great year for transplanting. So sometimes you get lucky. How many plugs in the patch? Well, depends on how I plant them. Let's see, about a foot apart, and get them pretty close. Like make them have to compete with each other a bit, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of weed pressure anyways. You can always kind of thin them later, but usually getting them close together and the same species, and then patching them, so clumps of same species. So you're getting diversity across, but they're growing together. And plants like to grow with their own kind. I'm noticing there is companion planting, and that does work too, but they do like to grow with each other. They will compete with each other. You know, same species will compete at this too, but they tend to do better when they're like in small monocultures. At least that's what I find. Oh, good. So you have plugs available. Yeah, go put the boards on soon if you can. Find those boards, put them on soon, get those weeds killed. You might have to like cut it down first and then kill it, but you're gonna get a lot of weed pressure. So you actually may want to, I mean, you can try to plug it next spring, depends how much of a perfectionist you want to be, but you really need to spend some time killing off that bed, you know, what's there, if you're trying to get rid of it. And sometimes it takes more than one season to do it. You can use herbicide too, but you don't have to, because you think about how herbicide works and you can kind of emulate it using, you know, the suffocating method. You know, if you're using something like Roundup or, you know, glyphosate, you're just killing the top of that plant. You know, you're just killing those plants that are alive right there. You're not killing the seed bed. So it's the same if you suffocate it with a board. You're killing the plant basically because you're suffocating it and it can't grow, but you're not killing the seed bed. So it's essentially like almost spraying an herbicide, but you don't need to use an herbicide. But you still have to worry about the seed bed. So if you really want to get on it, you can do some extra work, and you would likely have less work later, which is you take the board, you suffocate it, you open it up again, let the seeds come back up, and then you suffocate it again. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you move it around. So you work towards that until you kind of purge out the seed bed a bit more. Then you'll have a little better clean slate, and you plug it. The other thing you can do is plug it and then mulch it. So you have a little more, buy yourself a little more time for the weed pressure. And that's a good method too. But it still requires monitoring and working out there a lot, and watering. And I bet it might be hard to get water. Do you guys have a water source out there?
Yeah, we use a pump from the lake there.
Okay, that helps a lot. Yeah, so that could definitely help you improve your like floral diversity there.
What about fire? We have had a couple controlled burns out there. It's not a regular thing when we can actually get it to happen.
Yeah, I remember trying to get fire out there. I was actually, I mean, in Ohio, I was certified to burn. So I had the permit, but I remember we couldn't get, because of the highway 315 or whatever, it was really tricky. But if you can, maybe there, it's getting maybe a little easier sometimes. Fire is great. You just need to be able to carry the fire. I need to go look at that site again, maybe how much grass, here's my question here, how much grass is established there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know there's some blue stem out there, but grass, I'm not sure. We have a professor in ecological restoration, Matt Davies, and he's intending to orchestrate a burn out there. We were going to do this last fall, and it snowed that one day. We had about 2 inches of snow. It took a lot of permits with Ohio State, with the city of Columbus, with the Route 315 people. It took a lot of orchestration.
And then
so
you couldn't do it because it snowed.
That's it. The one day that we had accumulated snow the whole winter was the day we had scheduled to burn. Yeah. I'm hoping that can happen again this fall.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the difference, because I was giving you methods if you couldn't burn. So, you don't want to put your wooden board down if you're trying to burn. For instance, actually a metal sheet would work, and you can burn right over it. And I've used that before in the wilds, and it does work. But burning is really good, and you have that hillside, and fire tends to go sweep up the hill, so hopefully you have enough energy to carry a burn. It's all about the conditions, whether you get a good burn or not. It's going to be humidity, terrain, moisture, obviously, and then like your fuel. And so the fuel to me is questionable right now, because like goldenrod doesn't burn very well, for instance. What burns well are the grasses. So one of the things, if you can incorporate a burning regime in your management, you will want to enhance your grasses. And so as part of those monocultural, like, I'm going to call it like supplementations, utilize more grasses. And blue stem is very aggressive, but it's a good one to get established for burning. Little blue stem, big blue stem, Indian grass or Sargastrum, all those I think they all seem to work pretty well in those sites. But you would want to establish some of those to be able to carry a burn regularly. So that would be something to think about. Grazing and more realistic stimulating grazing with weed whackers. Grazing, well, I'm not sure what to say about that. I mean, I was interested in grazing at the wilds because we had bison, but I find it really difficult on these small gardens. I don't really have much advice on trying to stimulate like a grazing pressure. I'm not sure. I don't think I have an answer to that one. I would just say, yeah, disturbance is important to prairie. And there's different ways of giving that disturbance. Burning is one of them. And periodic moving, you know, if you can kind of continue kind of reintroducing new species, that will give you disturbance.
Yeah, I like the idea that, of course, grazing is not a realistic option on the hillsides there in pretty much all urban settings. That's why when you mentioned using a weed whacker to cause disturbance, that sounds definitely doable. And I don't know whether there's any literature on that or how one could go about finding it.
Yeah, I mean, weed whacking, you know, I would again look at it patchy. Think of it as a patchy. You might even want to, I mean, I'm a scientist, so, you know, and like it started as a scientific kind of patchy experiment. So, I mean, you may want to divide it into quadrants so you can think about it in numbers and like be like, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quadrants, and you know, you're dividing it, and so that you kind of have a way of maybe systematically going through it and kind of figuring out, okay, in quadrant 1A, you know, in 2001, we're going to start here. In 2005, we would go there, and you would rotate through, and you would continue to try to keep introducing these patches. That could be a really good way of getting your baseline diversity up, but it's going to take time. But it sounds like you've got sort of time and dedication there. And I think if you have an organized pathway, like organized plan of moving through the site, and you can all refer to where it is, you kind of know what it is, then I think you could develop a really good plan that encompasses supplementation, disturbance management, all of those things. You can even try some seeding. Like I would be brave enough, I think, to try some seeding. And the seeds that work really well, I thought, are those really tiny ones like Monarda and Pycnanthium, which is like mountain mint, and bee balm. Those mints, which pollinators adore, they have really tiny seeds. And I find that if you clear an area and you really try to purge the seed bank a bit, they grow pretty well by seed. They can also grow by individual seedlings, but sometimes seeding also can be useful and a little easier. So there's lots of different ways to do it. You know, there's not really wrong and right. I think the key is a plan that you have that everybody is aware of, so that you're not like guessing and you don't, you know, everybody sees the plan, and you have consistency over time, and you continually bring input to it, and you continually manage it. One of the best garden prairies in Ohio, no doubt, is at Guy Denny's residence, he's up in Morrow County. And he welcomes people. This is a good time to go see it. You can go in and just drive around it, because he allows people to come in, and I can give you the number and I can hook you up with it if you want. But the reason I bring it up is he's got one of the best examples of a prairie. I call it a prairie garden, because it wasn't a prairie. It was a farm field that he turned into a prairie. It's about 12 acres now or something like that. And it's beautiful and absolutely gorgeous. And he does all these things. He does it patched by, how he introduced it was he did it all by seed, but he started like from ground zero and did it by seed. But he you know, half an acre at a year at a time, you know, gradually built it all up, and he maintains it, and he patches so it's like grasses as a baseline so we can get a fire through it, but he patches his floral, his forbs. And so they're really showy. So it's like a beautiful display. That's why I call it a garden, because it's a display really, but yeah, it works so well. And he maintains it by himself. So if he can do it by himself, you guys can do it with a team of people. And he is one of the best prairie garden implementers in Ohio.
That sounds like we need to have another Zoom with him next.
Yeah, you could. He would probably do it. I could probably talk him into it.
Yes.
But I just going to see his site would be worthwhile. It's only an hour and a half from you guys or so. Maybe not even an hour. Because he works a lot with the governor's residence. He's the one behind the governor's residence. So he comes all the time. He'd be happy to share his knowledge.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Okay, what else do we have?
This is so wonderful.
Yeah, what is his name? Guy Denny, yes. Yeah.
Have we missed any questions in here, guys? Feel free.
Nicole, can I briefly share a hypothetical situation that cannot be taken back by anyone to any specific location? It's about an acre meadow that we've been trying to put in. Lisa knows the site. Most of it we did repeated herbicide applications and then seeded. One corner we wanted to do more showy, so we did what you are talking about, kind of focused on blocks of plugs. So we'd have a nice corner that would look like we did this on purpose while the rest was kind of coming. My challenge has been someone with a mower who has the keys to the mower and wants to mow it because he feels it's weedy. So we have red clover that's come in, and which is a great plant for bees. So I don't know how tenacious. So that's kind of one of my questions, is whether that's something that we need to worry about in the perspective of these native perennials. The other weed that we have a lot of is Queen Anne's lace, which I don't think is an issue because it's a biennial, and I think these other plants are going to become established and kind of outcompete, but I just can't keep the mower off the mower. And so I'm hoping that next year to kind of come back with another approach, but I think having someone like you with some expertise that can help me. Tell me about that. What do you think?
When did you plant it? Just curious. How long ago?
It was frost seeded 2 years ago. 2
years ago. Okay, so it's still really early. And
it is really early.
Prairie plantings, you got to be so patient with those early plantings. It's like, you got to yeah.
And I'm just worried because it's been mowed so tight. I haven't been out there because of COVID, but I think
because it's early and it's been mowed. I mean, yeah, tight. Yeah, too low is not good, but if you could get them to just mow it like this rather than like this. Early, the first 2 years, keeping it like this, no problem. Like, actually, it's a good method to use. But you don't want to get it too small because you're waiting for those perennials to get bigger, and they're like right now about like this, right? So that's why you don't want to get it like, you don't want to shave it. But having a high mow is perfectly fine and actually helps reduce competition. Having a mowed green path around it is always a great method. You got that?
Yeah.
And then having signs that are certified.
They're going in.
Pollinator signs. It's a pollinator habitat. We love our pollinators. Sponsored by XYZ. Those help. And yeah, first 2 years, don't expect anything. Like, you just kind of have to, like, first 2 years of a prairie planting, you just have to like turn your head and it's just a field. Third year though, you should see stuff, especially if you have like Retibita pinnata, which is like the gray-headed coneflower, those come up early. You should start getting echinacea. Black-eyed Susans, they're like more like a biannual. So I always used a lot of early stuff just to try to appease these people who were, you know, who love to mow things. Like tried it, oh, this is pretty. Even used annuals. I did that. The problem with using annuals though is that then you don't want to mow it and you need to get it mowed. So that's the trade-off with using annuals, is that you start mowing it. And you don't want to mow it because you've got flowering annuals, but you do want to keep it mowed. So I think you still have a really good shot at it being a good prairie if you know, planted all these things. Very likely that you're going to have a good prairie next year, especially if you can identify those young seedlings. If you know how to identify seedlings, I recommend, if there's a possibility of someone, because there's a lot of smart people around, to teach you how to identify prairie seedlings or seedlings, you know, native perennials. That's a really good knowledge base to have in your volunteer base, because that is the secret of polyculture. I'm calling it more polyculture now, because it's not always just native perennials that I'm using, but I'm using a polyculture technique in my own garden. And the only way I can do that is if I can identify all of the seedlings. And so getting really good at that, it helps a lot. And it's hard because those composites, the difference between an echinacea and a you know, coneflower, different coneflowers, and you know, a sunflower, and all of these different, especially in the Compositae family, because asters, all of those in that family, they're very difficult to tell apart as a seedling. But if you can start learning that, and the best way to do it is this is what Michael told me, like he told me, go in the greenhouse and play with these things. Go plant them all out, learn them and figure them out. And that's what I did. I took a whole couple of benches, loved it. And I just planted out all these seeds, and then you get to learn them all. And then you start understanding how to identify them in the field, and you can start making better decisions about your control metrics, your control measures, because you know what is actually there at a very young stage. And that's really important. I don't know if that helped you, but don't give up. And you're still got a huge shot at it because you're only 2 years in.
Yay, that's helpful. I think my strategy next year will be to say that we're going to really monitor what's there and what's coming up, and early pollinator visitation, and just so, you know, there's a purpose to him not mowing.
Yeah, and usually like the clovers tend to dissipate over time. That's often a sign that you have low nitrogen, right? Because you've got these clovers that are fixing nitrogen. They tend to do well in those areas. It could also just be the seed bank, but they tend to not be as aggressive over time because they're low growing species. And as you get these taller species coming in, they tend to kind of dissipate a bit. Queen Anne's lace, not a problem.
Hey, Denise, Edward Abbey's solution would be to sabotage the lawnmower.
I want to keep my jobs, Joe.
Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you.
Always a problem, the mowing. The mowing is always tricky. Trying to get that figured, and our mentality of what pretty is, you know, really hard.
Yes. We have a question. What's your recommended prep for seeding?
Lots of 2 years of prep. I mean, that's what I recommend, 2 years of prep. If you can cover a site for, you know, it depends on what you're willing to do. I mean, some people are really against herbicide. I used quite a bit of Roundup when I was at the Wilds, and it did help a lot. But there are other methods, like I was saying, the smothering technique seems to work pretty well. But you definitely want to prep your site. The more you prep your site, the less you're going to pull your hair out later trying to figure out how to get rid of the weeds. So preparation is huge, and giving it time. So having 2 years of prep where you know, kind of get rid of the seed, get rid of the biomass on top. Let the seed bank purge a little bit. Even a little bit of tilling, like light till. I wouldn't go deep tilling unless you're dealing with like really, really compacted soils, which I was dealing with at the Wilds, which we did have to do some release of the compaction, but most sites you don't have to do that with, but like doing a little bit of relief, kind of scarifying the top of the surface, letting the seed bank go crazy, letting it grow up again, and then smothering it again. You do a series of those. The more you can prep, the less work it will be later, but it takes a lot of patience. And when you're working with groups, like you're saying, like the lawnmower people and the maintenance people, they don't actually want to wait for you because it's so ugly, which is why I say do it in patches, because then you don't notice it as well as much, and you can do it in little spaces instead. And then it doesn't like look so ugly, because it looks really ugly for like 2 years. You can use a cover crop though. That's one way to do it too. I mean, there's 100 different ways to do it. You just have to like come up with a plan and stick with it. So, you know, you can also use cover crops and like rye, or there's, you know, you can look up, do you guys look at Prairie Moon Nursery, their catalog? That's a great nursery. It's out in, it's closer to us here in Chicago than it is to you, but I find that they've been doing this for so long. They've got all the methods figured out, and they want to sell their products. So they want you to be successful. So they'll even talk to you. They'll give you all kinds of advice. They'll send you good seed mixes. They've got it all figured out. They've been doing this for decades. So, you know, don't dismiss the companies who do this professionally. I don't know if there's the Ohio, there's an Ohio-based one too. Are they still in existence? I can't remember. But anyways, you know, don't forget to use the professionals who are trying to make a living doing this, because, you know, that's in their best interest to have you succeed. So they've really figured out a lot of the pathway to do it. Yeah, OPN, Ohio Prairie Nursery. Yeah, I mean, they've got the method down. They'll tell the same thing. They'll say site prep is huge. For them, when they're doing large scale prairie plantings, they like 2 years if they can get it. 2 seasons. But they know they can't always, so they have other ways of doing it, but they've got a good system in place. But you're dealing with a small enough area that you can do it by hand if you've got enough people. You don't need to do it by machine.
Wow, we have a lot of questions coming in now. And we only have 5 more minutes left.
Okay,
So,
yeah. How do you take care of established prairie field to eliminate woody growth and thorny bushes? That's a great question because it's really important. Okay, so, you know, we've established that you need woody species for butterflies. Great, but you don't want them in your meadow. So you need woody species, especially on the edge. Keep up, like look up, I will try to find a website that has some of the woody species. I think the Morton Arboretum actually has some something that I can send you, but you want those woody species, but you don't want them in your prairie, and you've got to manage for them because we live in an area that tends to go towards woodlands. I mean, the ecological pressure is a driving towards a more woody system. That's just what happens in Ohio.
yes.
So if you want to keep it open, you've got to maintain it. A mower can do that if you can't use fire. Fire is number one. I recommend fire. Guy Denny does it every year. Every year. We argue about this all the time, by the way. He and I argue about whether every year is good. I say no. He says yes. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I would say every 2 years would be great if you can, even if you can only do it every 3 years. But after even missing 1 year, you can get a lot of growth of woody species. Therefore, you want to get them mowed down either early in the spring. Over winter is a great time. You know, leaving it over winter to help with some of the habitat can help some of your native wildlife, and then doing an early mowing every year is a good idea. I hope that answered that question. See what else can I, Walnut Creek seeds cover. What else should I answer? Have you ever used a flame weeder? Is that like with the fire? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen it done. I don't have one. Yeah, that works. I mean, it gets rid of the biomass. But remember, you've still got a seed bank. And that's the tricky part, because there's all those seeds that have been sitting in the seed bank ready to go. Or if you open up an area, it's open, seeds fly in. You know, they come in from different areas, and that's so, you know, you got to kind of protect your patches.
Well, you know, we have a pause in the conversation, and we're here at 11 o'clock. I hate to cut it off, but in honor of your time, we know how busy you are. Maybe we should stop here. But all the rest of these questions that have sort of accumulated in that chat box, if anybody wants to send me a question, I can help you get the answer.
There's so many resources, you know. I would say if someone could come and divide your area up in areas that you can identify them, so you guys can all speak the same language. Have a general plan, because since there's like 5 different ways of doing the same thing, you want to be, you know, you want to all kind of know what is the plan for these different areas, and then follow through that way, and maybe even assign roles a bit, like, okay, I can take care of this part of it, maybe someone else can take care of another part. And if you have a really good plan, a good vision, you guys have a good vision, get a good vision. I think you've got that. Have a plan, and then have some roles assigned to it, and then utilize the resources that are available. And Ohio has so many great resources and so many great people that know a lot about this, that I think you'll find you'll be successful.
I love it. Kelly says she got 2 books that's really helped with seed collection and propagation. So everyone go out and get Growing and Propagating Wildflowers by Harry Phillips, and A Guide to Wildflowers in Winter by Carol Levine.
Yeah, those are good books. And go collect seed, and Guy will let you collect seed from his property. Go get seeds. Like, you need a lot of plant material, and then utilize the greenhouse and plant. If you can do that, like, I bet you can pull some strings to do that. Get a student on it. What a great learning experience to grow those plants and have them available to plant. That would be really fun and engaging. And you can do it all in one day if you wanted. You know, it's one of those events you can plan. So that would be a really good opportunity too. So.
Yes, that would be great.
Oh,
thank you. Keep me informed.
We will. We definitely will.
And if there's anything else I can do, I'm happy to help. And thank you very much for letting me be part of the discussion.
Nicole, I'm thrilled that you could be here, and I, want to emphasize just the web of Chadwick. You're one of our legacy students, and I appreciate your time today coming back to bring us up to speed about our own grounds and how we can work to enhance those. And I'm grateful for your time today. Denise Ellsworth and Julia Wilson are great leaders to this project. Petra is taking huge leadership with this project, along with many others. And I'm very excited about where we're going. I hope this isn't a one and done, and I look forward in 2 years to bringing you back to Columbus to see this site.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And don't forget, share your knowledge and experience with ArbNet. You guys are ArbNet accredited. That is a program that I work with at the Arboretum. And I'd love for you guys to share what you've learned so that other arboreta across the country can also utilize what you've learned. So if you do have eventually something to share, we'd love to put that up on our resource page for ArbNet. So keep that in mind too, okay?
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
You have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.